Another fairly meaty guard preview today, and confirming a lot of things from previous leaks. It seems that Games Workshop is focusing on the memes of the Codex today, with a look at the rather apocalyptic Deathstrike missile and the far more apocalyptic Guardsman Marbo. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd cover Games Workshop's latest guard preview. Quite a lot of this tallies very well with the various leaks that we've been seeing from Mr. Morty and Gloria's excellent channel, but we have had a few other interesting things confirmed, particularly regarding the Deathstrike. I thought we'd go through each bit of it quickly and see how the previews tally with the leaks that we've been shown already. First up, while the other day we had Cadian shock troops, now we've got a quick look at the Death Corps and the Catachan jungle fighters, both of which confirm their own little mini regimental rules that happen within their own troops datasheets. The Cadian shock troops get their exploding sixes with their lasguns. It looks like the Death Corps do indeed get this mini transhuman rule where they can't be wounded on a 1 to 2. Obviously it's not going to be relevant against everything, small arms will see that as no different, but a lot of the time the opponent might well be trying to size down guard infantry with a whole bunch of strength 6 attacks, and they will be a bit hardier against those. They didn't go into detail as to too much, but they did say that they could take specific bits of war gear from the Veteran Guardsman kit, such as the Medipack and the Sniper Rifle, and I kind of feel that specifically calling out the Sniper Rifle like that might fit well with them actually taking it away for other units, as was previously rumoured. Depending on final points, that could be kind of interesting though. Having a Medpack and a hardier Guardsman squad could just make an enormously hard squad to remove. It's only really going to be too much of an advantage though if they don't charge loads for them in terms of points. So when we get the eventual points values, we'll have to see whether the datasheet is worth it over just running them as infantry squads. For the Catachan jungle fighters, they also confirmed that exploding sixes to hit in melee rule that we had rumoured. It does seem like it'd be a bit less exciting if it's just on strength 3 guardman attacks though apparently there will be one of those regimental doctrines to get them a strength 4 again. But even then, if there isn't easy access to getting multiple extra attacks on them like we had in the previous codex, I just can't really see them being that scary. Currently in the guard codex with Strachan plus the priest, you can get the Catachans 2-3 attacks at strength 4 for fairly cheap models, which is quite nice, but you still don't see guard melee lists in 9th edition making much headway, not compared with how good they were in 8th edition. I'm remaining a bit unconvinced by them at the moment, but maybe they'll have something else that will make them worth it. Otherwise, they did confirm that they would indeed be able to get 2 different flamers in the squad, again specifically calling out flamers, maybe implying the rumours that they wouldn't be able to take the other special weapons anymore. Could be pretty annoying if you do collect Catachans and you've upgraded them with things like plasma guns and stuff, though I suppose you could always just run them as the standard infantry squads. Otherwise, from Morty and Glory's leaks, the Death Corps squad are apparently going to be 80 points. That will be quite a lot more than the rumoured points value for the Cadians or the standard infantry at 15 points more. Apparently they might be able to take 3 different special weapons in the unit somehow, perhaps the regular ones plus a sniper rifle or something. And the Medicae costs an extra 5 points. That one allows you to ignore the first failed save plus the keywords to allow you to resurrect dead guardsmen. Overall, could be interesting enough if you want a fairly elite infantry squad to put in a Chimera or something, but it still looks like it might be more interesting to use Kazakin for that. If we had these rules but a little bit less pricey though, could be really good. For the Catachans, supposedly they're 70 points, for some reason 5 points more than the Cadians, despite looking worse in my opinion, so hopefully that doesn't turn out to be right, or it might just seem that they're a bit badly balanced perhaps. They would get the Catachan keyword though, which could be helpful for certain things like that vicious trap stratagem, not that that looks super strong though. If this was their loadout, I'd say at the very least they should probably be 65 points, the same as the others, but at this point, for all we know that they might be, and they might have been adjusted by the final points cost for the codex. Next up, we've got the man, the myth, the legend, Sly Marbo himself. In the preview, Games Workshop have officially confirmed the stats on his new weapons, the Ripper Pistol and Envenom's Blade, and both of them look like they remain pretty decent ways to really mess up enemy infantry. The Ripper Pistol is a 12-inch pistol 3 weapon with strength 5, AP-2 and damage 2, plus it can snipe characters and 6s to wound doom mortals. Compared with the previous fairly tame strength 5, AP-0 and damage 1 affair it was before, it's just so much better to be honest. It's genuinely a threat to things like Space Marines, rather than only being good to take out the lightest of infantry. Kind of makes Marbo look interesting as almost like a little mini assassin character. His damage could do 2 or 3 wounds on average to a toughness 3 or 4 character with a 5+ invul, and he averages 2 wounds to a Space Marine with armor of contempt. Then, if he did get to do a turn of unrestricted damage, he could follow that up with a charge from his Envenomed Blade. That's now strength +2, AP-2 and damage 1, but gets damage 2 against non-vehicles. A pretty similar profile to the pistol to be honest, It looks like he could be okay for hunting Space Marines and medium infantry. His rumour profile was 5 attacks at weapon skill 2+, so that'd mean 2 or 3 dead guardsmen or 1 or 2 dead Space Marines. If you did try and get him into a character or something, if you could get his pistol and his blade damage off, you'd have a pretty reasonable chance of killing Space Marine support characters, which is pretty cool if you ask me, and apparently he's able to disappear off into the underbrush after he's done so. From the leaks that we saw previously for him, apparently that would all be for 50 points, so that's cheap enough to be pretty expendable if you ask me. And to deliver that brutal damage to the heart of the enemy, apparently he can deep strike and re-roll charges on the turn that he comes in. That will give him a coin flip's chance of getting the charge off. That slipping away rule is apparently being able to go into reserve at the end of the fight phase once per game. I don't know whether he would have had to already have fought for that, or if he could maybe just drop, shoot with his pistol, and then disappear if he doesn't manage to make the charge. That will be kind of cool. He also has a melter mine, which allows him to make an attack to deal some mortal wounds against vehicles if it makes sense to. And both that, having the Catachan keyword, and the melter mine all give him a vicious traps boost, which means if the enemy targets him, it'll be a 3+ to deal 2d3 mortal wounds to them if he is in cover. Quite a fun stratagem, that one. That could well be worth it for just 1 CP. Overall, he is looking pretty usable in my opinion. Could be a fun addition to an army to maul some infantry units, or perhaps go for the jump on some characters. Next up, they have previewed 2 of the 6 Officio Prefectus Orders, the abilities that commissars now have to actually make their troops fight a bit better, as well as just scaring them and giving them better leadership. When I heard that these were a thing, I did think that they were a pretty good idea, to be honest. It actually makes commissars into a really useful asset in the battle line, and having at least one in the army could be pretty preferable. From their previous order preview, it sounds like that if they issue an order, it will get to splash to other platoon units within 6 inches of that one, so it could be quite good to affect a whole bunch of units, and I feel that there's at least a fairly reasonable chance that if you nominate the target directly, these might be able to target auxiliary choices too. We would have to wait for final confirmation on that though. Lord Solar Leontus gets them as well though, and that will certainly give him a lot more flexibility if you want to use one of these situational picks, and it winds up being the best tool for the job. In any case, the 2 that they've shown off for us are Forwards for the Emperor and Get Back in the Fight. Forwards for the Emperor is kind of one that we already had, but a little bit better. It allows you to move or advance, and then you counter stationary for shooting. It basically gives you extra mobility or extra firepower depending on which way you look at it. And there's quite a few use cases, I think. You could have, say, a heavy weapon squad moving and shooting and not wanting the heavy weapon penalty. It could be good for just getting that extra burst of movement to get some close range things in range, things like rapid fire las guns or melter guns or plasma guns. Or it could be that you just absolutely need to advance anyway to get onto an objective or something, and using this order could allow you to do that and also get to shoot the enemy a bit, even if dealing a little bit of chip damage isn't your primary concern. Finally, if you can indeed target Auxilia with this, it could pair pretty nicely with the Ogren's very scary Ripper Gun profile that we saw the other day. 3 shots at strength 5, AP -2 and damage 2. They're assault weapons and quite close range, so having them jumping around the board quite quickly and getting those up close and personal would be nice. The other one that they've confirmed is Get Back in the Fight. This allows a unit to fall back and shoot or fall back and charge. You can't have both, but having a bit more flexibility is really quite good. I guess in theory that could be pretty handy if you do have some good combat troops. It sounds like you will be able to issue these to things like the new Rough Riders, and if you could do it on Bulgarin, then that could both be handy for charging for them. In general though, Guard are often an army where you want to have infantry dealing damage up close, maybe things like Catachans, Scions, or even just infantry units taking objectives while blazing away with some special weapons. Having the option to get a bit more firepower like this when you fall back because you don't want to get mauled in combat is pretty good. This one could be quite a good reason to have a commissar lurking somewhere in the battle line. I guess the only minor gripe with that one is that it used to be a general regimental order, so it was one that you could bring out on your officers if you needed to. Now you would need to commit to a commissar to activate that, and they might not exactly be in the right place at the right time. Otherwise, from the Mordian Glory leaks, we've got a few other details on the Commissar. Looks like for the price of those extra orders, he is going up to 40 points a model rather than 25, though he does get a small stat line boost for his trouble, getting an extra wound and a 5+ invul. It appears that Lord Commissars might just not be a thing anymore, so this is now the only way that you get them, though they would be quite easy to include in just about any army, as you can take one slot free if an officer's present. Otherwise, the Plasma Pistol and Power Sword both cost you an extra 5 points. Apparently they can't take Power Fists anymore as they no longer sell a model that has one. The rumour was that you would be able to order abhumans and officers as well as infantry, which is quite fun, and their summary execution rule is now a bit more simple. If the squad fails a morale test, then they just lose the one model and no more, basically to represent the commissar blamming one of them. You can only use that once per commissar per turn though. Overall, if foot guard does wind up being a usable way that you can play guard, I think having a commissar in the ranks will be a pretty good idea. It might be a bit more limited in scope though. If you're just taking one unit, I'm not sure a commissar will be your first choice of officers to support them, not compared with maybe standard regimental orders from an officer, like say making Catachans take aim or something. Otherwise, from the leaks and rumours, here are the other Officio Prefectus Orders. The first two that were previewed tally exactly with Mordian Glory's leaks, so perhaps a little bit more reliable for saying that the other four might be right. There's a few interesting ones here. Gain Obsec from at all cost. Could certainly be good fun on something tanky like Ogrins or Bulgrins if they can take it. Duty and Honour allows you to do actions even if you fell back, shot, or advanced. If you take Raise the Banners or something, I could see that being usable for a turn perhaps. Show Them Steel, Show Them Contempt gives you +1 leadership and a 5+ save against mortal wounds. If that could splash out to a bunch of units, that could be seriously nice against a mortal wound spam army. If you were playing Thousand Suns, then that could potentially save a fair few guardsmen's lives. And lastly, there's an interesting one called Remain Vigilant. Units can't set up within 12 inches of the unit ordered, and they also get a 5+ overwatch. That could be very, very nasty against armies like Genestealer Cult, who really rely on their reserves. You might just be able to deny them a whole section of the board where they can meaningfully drop to deal damage. Overall, looking good, a whole bunch of niche but quite powerful abilities here. I feel like most of the time they are going to have something important to do every turn. Finally, last but by no means least, we have the Deathstrike missile launcher. When all the leaked datasheets came out, it does look like this one was one of the most standout. Previously seen as kind of worthless within the Guard Codex, besides the fun factor, it now seems that Games Workshop is confirming the rather curious ways it has of firing, where you basically get to nominate a target, and then the enemy gets to scurry out the way if they don't want to get hit, but then you can choose not to fire the missile and save it for the next turn if there's nothing meaningful within the target radius. According to Games Workshop's preview, the way that it places the target is with an action. The rumours had it at the start of your turn until the end of your turn, then you nominate a place on the board, and then the opponent has their time to run out the way. Then when it's your turn, you can opt to have the missile automatically hit the marker, or do the action again and recalibrate the target elsewhere. There are 3 different warhead choices as rumoured, and Games Workshop have actually confirmed that you can indeed select which one that you're using after seeing the enemy's army, so you could get to reactively pick the warhead that's most usable for the job. This Godspear one, it looks like it's the most threatening against certain armies, but I could see it being really quite underwhelming against other ones with lots of multiple small units, where the enemy just doesn't really care too much about losing any one of them. The Godspear warhead only has a really narrow blast range, so it's only 3 inches from the marker, but then you roll a dice, on a 2 to 3 you deal 8 mortal wounds, 4 to 5 for 12, and a 6 for 16, so unless you roll a dreaded 1, you're doing a pretty decent number of damage. The thing is though that the radius on that is very small. If the opponent wants to move away from it, then they will be able to. The only things that might not be able to are things like static fortifications and things, or potentially slow moving units that are hampered by difficult terrain or can't move through ruins perhaps. It means that it might be a more of a mobility and board control type thing rather than an actual damage dealer most of the time. It seems that from the article they think that the idea to do is to declare it on your opponent's home field objective each turn and give them the option of either holding it with something cheap that's going to get wrecked or just vacating it entirely and giving up some crucial victory points. Otherwise though, you could maybe use it to try and discourage enemies from going down crucial choke points if they've got units that will need to go in a certain way. You could potentially run multiple different Deathstrikes maybe, and then if you had a bunch of them in a cluster, it might be that whatever way your opponent moves, they're still going to get hit by one of them. Or it does look like there's a couple of ways of reducing certain units' movement in the Codex, a Psychic Spell plus a Tank Order for some focused fire. If you can get stacking modifiers to movement on one enemy unit, it might be that they just can't afford the Godspear, and you might be able to nuke them off the table. It's certainly a really interesting one, more of a theoretical threat with enormous damage than an actual one that you can guarantee. I'd say maybe the single biggest question for how usable it's going to be might just be how big that Deathstrike target marker actually is. If it is just nominate a single point on the board, then the Godspear missile actually won't be able to affect an entire objective's radius, as objective markers in 40k are bigger than a single point. They're more like a 40mm base, I believe. That means that you would have a sliver of objective that the opponent could still hold it, while still keeping safely out of range of the missile. If it is just a point marker, it might make the Godspear missile significantly less useful, unless you do have some way to actually try and make it hit the enemy, so I guess we'll have to wait and see on that front. If I had to guess though, I would say it's probably going to be a point marker. Finally, from the Mordian Glory leaks for this one, it is supposedly 150 points, and we do have the other couple of missiles that you can equip it with. The Vortex missile, which Games Workshop does mention as well, that'll apparently have a D3 plus 3 inch range, so a bit wider. It does massively less damage, with 2 to 3 for D3 mortal wounds, 4 to 5 for D3 plus 1, and a 6 for 2D3, but after you've resolved it, it remains on the battlefield for another attack on a 4+, so if you do get lucky, it could maybe chip away at the enemy for a few turns. Otherwise, there's the Plasma Barrage missile. That one is a much wider radius, hitting enemy units within D3 plus 6 inches. That could genuinely be hard to avoid for certain units, and it's a one-shot splash effect thing, but on a 2 to 3 it deals D3 plus 1 mortal wounds, a 4 to 5 for 2D3, and a 6 for D3 plus 3. If your opponent's got loads of multiple small units, maybe that one or the Vortex one might be the one to go for. Looks kind of fun though, I'm sure we'll get people trying them out. So anyway, that's another round of Guard previews. Hopefully it won't be too much longer until we actually get the full Codex details. I'll certainly be looking forward to making a full Codex review and a few more in-depth breakdowns of the individual units once we actually have all the details. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that, and let me know what you think of the leaks and the previews. Finally, if you've enjoyed the video, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked down in the video description if you're interested. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.